All right, in this section of the course, we are going to take a look at Spring Boot developer tools. Now, this is a huge addition to the Spring tool set. I remember years ago, I used to be a big Grails developer. I still like the Grails framework. It's basically a groovy wrapper around Spring Framework. And a couple years ago, this doesn't exist. And the Grails guys had this technology to automatically recompile everything and allow you to see your changes both on the Java side, or Groovy in the Grails case, and your template changes of anything that you're doing for web development. So this made your development a lot faster, and it's having it now in regular Spring as part of the Spring Boot developer tools. It's a huge addition. It's a huge productivity saver. I'm going to go through, tell you more about the developer tools, and then we'll get into a live demo. We'll take a look and see the stuff happen in action. In this video, we're going to take a look at Spring Boot developer tools. So we add in the developer tools to the project using the artifact Spring Boot developer dev tools. You can add this in Maven or through Gradle. And then developer tools are automatically disabled when you're running a package application. I have, for example, running java-jar or a war or something like that. So this allows it to be disabled when you deploy it to production. So the dev tools are not something you want running when you have your application deployed in production, but for running on your developer console, that's something you definitely want running. And by default, when we're running the Spring Boot plugins and it does the repackaging, it will not include the developer tools jar and the repackaged jar archive. Now, one of the things that it gives us is an automatic restart, and this is actually really cool. I like this quite a bit. And what it's going to do is trigger a restart of the Spring context when classes change. And the slick part of what they're doing here is they're using two different class loaders. One class loader is going to be for your application, and the other class loader is going to be for your project jar dependencies. So if you think about it, your jar dependencies are going to be static. Those aren't changing, so they get loaded into its own class loader, and then you get a second class loader for stuff that does change. And this makes your restarts very fast, because what's going to happen is you're not bringing up the entire world. The jars from Spring and all the Spring's dependencies and whatever your project needs, that's already loaded into the class loader, so you don't have to reread all that. And Spring is just restarting the context with fresh classes from your project. So it does happen pretty rapidly. Now, the way this is going to work in Eclipse is going to get triggered with a save action. And in Eclipse, by default, it's going to compile the class. And that when that class object changes, that's what's triggering the restart in the developer tools. Now, in IntelliJ, by default, you're going to have to do a build go to the menu build and make project, and that's what's going to trigger it. IntelliJ does have an option to automatically recompile the files, but for some reason it gets disabled when you have an application running. Not something I necessarily agree with, and in a future video I'm going to show you how to override this inside of IntelliJ. There's an advanced setting that you can override that property and get IntelliJ to work like Eclipse, where when you save the file and IntelliJ does automatic saves, it's going to trigger a restart for you. Now, one thing that happens is by default, templates are going to be cached when the application's running, and this is done for performance. Obviously, you don't want to be reading your templates over and over, but the downside of this is to see changes when you're making a change to a template, you're going to have to restart the container. Now, developer tools by default is going to disable template caching, so you can see your changes right away. Now, real nice technology that's included with developer tools is live reload. Live reload is a technology that's automatically going to trigger a browser refresh. And the way this works is you need a live reload server running, and Spring Boot developer tools is going to include this. And then you can get a plugin for your browser of choice over at livereload.com. And all major browsers are supported, and it works pretty well. I've used it a lot on Chrome and Firefox. I generally don't develop in Safari, but there is a plugin available for Safari as well if that is your browser of choice. Now I'm going to jump over to IntelliJ and give you a demonstration of this. Now what I have is I've got the windows resized, so I have the application running in the background. This little wheel here, that is the live reload server saying that the browser is connected, and I do have this up and running. So the first thing I want to show you is I have a system outline here, and I'm going to change that to say something. we'll just say 1, 2, 3, 4. And when I come up to build project, we can see down here it's going to trigger a start. So you see the Spring context restarted, and that happened pretty darn quick. So whenever I do a class change, I'm going to just do a simple change there again and come in and build. And we can see that it's going to get picked up here, and the Spring context reloads really quick, and we're back up and running. So you can see how when you're making changes in the Spring context, how fast or how much faster you're going to be in your production, because you're not going in and restarting things. Now the next thing, let's take a look at the index page, and I'm going to change the text of my recipes. We'll just add some random text there. Now, it's a good habit to click save, because IntelliJ does do an automatic save. Eclipse, you're always clicking save, but IntelliJ does do an automatic save for you. But this is now saved, but it's not deployed. So what we need to do is a build here, and we're going to build the project, and that you're going to see no classes changed, but we automatically reloaded. So do another change here so you can see just how fast that happens. Make sure I save it first. So there's the compile, and you can see how quick that's happening. So if you're on a dual monitor setup, you can see how quickly your changes are going to be applied. This is a pretty convenient thing to be having, so you can work within the Java space and your HTML templates or your time-leaf templates and see your changes right away. It's a huge productivity saver for you to have. All right, so that is Spring Boot Developer Tools. Real cool technology. I hope you can see how that's really going to change your development. I use it all the time. From experience, it works pretty good. Sometimes the refresh, something goes wrong, so you do have to do a restart. So just be aware of that. So as you're using it, if something funny happens, just restart the container and you're usually fine. But most of the time, you can sit there and do your development and restart, and it works just fine. But every now and then something goes wrong and you actually have to bounce the container and bring it back up. But other than that, they are a huge time saver. I highly recommend you get in the habit of utilizing the developer tools to speed up your application development.